È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. EasyBank, semplicemente banca.
Questa è una storia fatta di energie diverse, nate per sorprendere.
Ed eccoci arrivati al settore della distribuzione dei...
Partite da lontano, vanno avanti ancora oggi. Perché andare avanti non vuol dire seguire una sola direzione, ma trasformare idee in soluzioni. Quelle di Plenitude ed Eni Live, che si completano nella famiglia Eni, da energie diverse, un'energia unica.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. EasyBank, semplicemente banca.
Questa è una storia fatta di energie diverse, nate per sorprendere.
Ed eccoci arrivati al settore della distribuzione dei...
Partite da lontano, vanno avanti ancora oggi. Perché andare avanti non vuol dire seguire una sola direzione, ma trasformare idee in soluzioni. Quelle di Plenitude ed Eni Live, che si completano nella famiglia Eni, da energie diverse, un'energia unica.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo esiste anche grazie a te.
Non finirà.
It won't end until we talk. This is a sentence taken from A Paragon, a book by Colum, McCann, who is here with us. So it won't end until you and I share our stories. We offer each other ourselves because communication can save people. It's about breaking patterns, but the important condition is to be true, authentic. This is also something that Pope Francis asked the communicators, saying, are you true to yourself, in your insight, in your life? And then another thought-provoking sentence is the following. This is a sentence by Cardinal Pizzaballa. So peace is possible also through words. If you dehumanize the other, well, then this is very dangerous because this can allow then physical violence. So I welcome our guests to living giants of literature. So Javier Cercas and Colum McCann, welcome. Two different backgrounds and stories. Colum McCann was born and raised in Dublin. He is the author of 7 novels and 3 collections of short stories. He got several awards. We met him last year with A Paragon, and the story of 2 fathers, an Israeli and a Palestinian, that in spite of the loss of their sons, so they did not hate each other, but instead they became friends, and they bring their testimony around the world. And then American Mother is the book that is going to be presented next Tuesday. It's about the mother of James Foley, beheaded by ISIS, and Diane, the mother, decided to meet and forgive the murder of his son. Javier Cercas, writer and university professor. His books have been translated into more than 30 languages, and in his books we find references to the Franco dictatorship, the Spanish Civil War, and his 2 latest books, 2 crime stories, go back to the topics of history, memory, that have an impact on the lives of their main characters. And then we have this book that is something unique. You followed the Pope in his journey, in his travel to Mongolia, and he wrote So God's Madman at the End of the World about his experience. And then we have Paolo Ruffini, journalist, the 3rd guest of this panel, director of newspapers, long career at Rai TV network. Today he works for the Vatican for communication. You are a prefect, you are not a cardinal. Yeah. So it's thanks to him if we are here today with Javier and Colum. So communication is a key topic, and it was at the center of the Jubilee, of the latest Jubilee, and also during one of the latest meetings of Pope Francis with the communicators. And also Pope Leo XIV put communication at the center of, his speeches. So it seems that writers and communicators and journalists can play a very key role in today's world. So my first question for everyone is this, and so please be pragmatic because we need to understand. So can we still communicate hope? Is it still possible? So, or not? Or is today's communication just desperate information? And we see that with the crime stories, sensationalism and propaganda. So Paolo Ruffini, you communicate to all Catholics in the world. So can communicate really build communion? Well, first of all, I'll start from the question. Can we still communicate hope? Well, I think that we can and we have to. We must. And we need to find hope in many things surrounding us that have become invisible. We are so blinded by, evil. Evil is shining so much brighter than the good. And so we totally skip the good stories that are around us, the stories of hope. So yes, we can communicate hope, and we can share that. As far as our role, we try to address Catholics and also non-Catholics and try to provide a sort of interpretation, a reading of what happens around us. Because sometimes, again, there's a lot of noise that prevents people from having a clear vision of things. And so, again, sometimes people do not see things because we are overwhelmed with information. But again, we need instead to make people aware of what is happening, because then people can regain hope, because sometimes the feeling is that people lose hope. And this is useful not just for Catholics, but to the whole world. So it's important also not to build walls around us Catholics. Being Catholic should not be a border, not at all. It's instead a possibility of encounter. We had an encounter with the Lord, with God, and for us it's a way to read history, and we can share that. And to be short, I'll say one more thing. Maybe you have already saw the exhibition, but if you visit the exhibition on the martyrs of Algeria, that has been organized thanks to several stakeholders, including stakeholders from the Vatican. But the last room, where there is the spiritual testament of Christian de Chergé, you can read how absolute evil can be object of a redemption, because redemption is possible for anybody. And love really conquers all. And this is really a founding pillar of Christianity. Jesus was put on a crucifix. He died, and then he rose again. And this is such a powerful message. And this explains what communion is, what redemption is, and what the tale of evil can be. Because again, God sacrificed his son for men, and so it is possible to get redemption from evil. So this is what we try to do in a somehow flawed way, but we keep trying.
Giro la domanda.
So I asked the same thing to Colum McCann. You wrote 2 books, the last 2, and they seem to rely on the lack of hope in the beginning, at least.
It does seem... Oh, excuse me. Hello, everybody. And it's very nice to be back in Rimini. I believe in hope.
Io credo nella speranza.
But I also know that we live in a time when it's difficult to believe in hope.
In un'epoca in cui è difficile credere nella speranza.
It seems to me that we're living in broken times.
Che viviamo davvero in tempi molto complicati.
We've always lived in broken times, though, right? Whether it be 200 years ago or 100 years ago during the First World War or during the Second World War or in the 1960s when we thought there was no hope, or in 2001 where it seemed for a while that there was no hope. But always hope seems to win through. The difference now is that we're living in the exponential age, and everything is happening so quickly. So that when we go to repair the broken things, let's say you have a broken mirror, and you want to pick the broken mirror up to fix it. In the process of trying to fix the mirror, the broken piece itself also breaks. And it feels to us like there is this shattering. And it seems to me that if we can learn to slow down, we can initiate the form of repair that Paolo is talking so beautifully about. Because the theme of our times has to be repair. How do we repair what is so obviously broken in front of us? How do we communicate with one another? How do we slow down and listen to one another and understand one another when so many people
don't want us to listen to one another, because listening is difficult, but it's absolutely beautiful when we learn to listen not only across divides, but within our own communities too. And it does seem to me that that is part of the job of the church, to be both tiny and epic at the same time, to be local and to be global. And so the talk starts locally and then it extends itself globally. And that, I think, is part of, well, that might actually be the essence of hope.
Javier.
Javier, good morning. It is the first time that Roman Jacobson, great Russian linguist, went to Harvard University, and was welcomed by the president. And he told him, Mr. Jacobson, I've been told that you speak 14 languages. And Jacobson said, yes, it's true, but I speak all of them in Russian. So I speak Italian in Spanish, and I apologize for that. I don't know. I think that we need to go back to basics. So telling the truth, that's the easiest thing of all, for an evangelic reason. So the gospel says that so the freedom will make you free. So lies can create slaves. That's as easy as that. Yeah. But today we live times that give the impression to many of us, well, especially this is about journalists that fight every day against lies. The good journalists, not the bad journalists, of course. They say and they acknowledge that today the most lies are told more than ever in history. Well, lies have always been told. But today, as journalists know very well, today, lies, reach out to so many people because, we have social media, we have AI, so if the lies can be, broadcast in a non-controlled and very rapid and huge way. We have no control on that. So that's the thing today, and this is an evidence. So, truth has a hard time today, and I think that this is the biggest danger today. And this is an evidence, again. It's not an opinion. Let's take Bill Clinton. Bill Clinton was close to be obliged to abandon the White House for one lie, not for his sexual relation with a woman, but, for a lie. And today, at the White House, there is a man that has made lies a tool of government. But he's not the only one. The problem is that the other politicians saw that, and not just politicians, they saw that it works. And so why not? Let's do the same. So, truth seems to be, lacking any value. I'm not a journalist. I write novels. I write twice a month, a newspaper, but Paolo is a journalist. I'm not. I just have a column twice a month. But you have such a difficult role. It's a struggle. And it goes without saying that we need to protect and defend the truth. This is an issue that has to do with every one of us, not just journalists, but to citizens. We need to do that. Otherwise, we will all turn into slaves. We have to do this. It's a must-do thing. So, among the narratives and the most difficult things to tell, there are conflicts. And so peace peace to be impossible, unreachable. If we have a look at today's geopolitical scenario, in Paragon, we have the two stories of an Israeli father and a Palestinian father. Colum, you said many times that the world is kept together, is held together by stories. Can you please tell us more about what it is about? Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I wrote a book called A Paragon, which is about an Israeli father and a Palestinian father, both of whom lost their daughters in separate parts of the conflict. In an amazing way, they came together because they realized that they wanted to use the force of their grief in order to change the world in some way. They believe something quite simple. Look, we don't have to love each other. We don't even have to like each other. But we are doomed unless we understand one another. And so I think that's particularly important because we understand one another through the telling of stories. And I believe Pope Francis knew this extraordinarily well. He realized the value of communication, of stories, of storytellers, of artists, and he engaged with people and sort of pleaded with us to begin to try to understand one another across the borders, across the boundaries. I do think that is one of the things. I had a chance to say that watching Pope Francis through video and so on, when he went into prisons and he sat down and he washed the feet of these young people and these women in front of him, it was an extraordinary thing. And I think in a larger sense, what he was saying is, I acknowledge you, no matter where you are, no matter who you are, and your story is important. And so in a certain way, to extend that metaphor, I think what Pope Francis was saying to us is that stories can wash the feet of the world.
Quindi in qualche modo si riparte dal
So somehow we need to go back to people, to the human. Even if technology seems to be so disruptive, human relations remain key. Javier Cercas, you are also a story hunter, a passionate one. In your books, you often tell things about the past, and so history and memory are not very fashionable today. What do you think? Well, history and memory are not fashionable? Well, yes, maybe. I don't know. Maybe they were never trendy or fashionable. But still, I don't know. My books are different. But my latest book is certainly the most peculiar one. And the blame for this book is to put on Paolo Ruffini, is the culprit. Because, the church was so daring. The church did something incredible. And I remember what one of my friends at the Vatican usually tells me, that Pope Francis used to say to some people, be daring, take risks. And for me, that was a major risk, because for the first time in my life, maybe in history, the church... the Vatican opened up its doors to a novelist, me, who is not, a believer, to tell a travel to Mongolia. And Mongolia is a pretty exotic place, but the Vatican is much more exotic than Mongolia, for real, believe me. Yes, believe me, it is a much more exotic destination. And to me, that was an extraordinary experience, totally extraordinary. And nobody else had done that before. And to me, the big work was not reading many books, but to me the hardest work was to somehow clean my gaze, to clean the gaze from all the prejudice I had. Because the Catholic Church has always been there, and the whole world has prejudice vis-à-vis Catholicism, and especially in countries like ours, Ireland, Italy, Spain, that have such a strong Catholic tradition. Everybody thinks, everything about the Catholic Church. Everybody has prejudice, either against or in favor of the Church, or 50-50. And so to me, the biggest work was to clean my eyes somehow from prejudice and see what happens, not what I would like to see, what I expected to see, what I see, as simple as that, the people working there. So what's, the Church today about? The people working at the Vatican, they're not as weird as we may think. Because I had that kind of idea, the Vatican, secrets, mysteries, hermetic place, what happens behind orgies in the Sistine Chapel, satanic rituals. That was the idea. But who are these people? Who was Jorge Mario Bergoglio at the center? That was my job, to see it as it is, cleaning my gaze. I think that this is what we try to do as writers. And there was an intellectual in Russia saying that the mission of art is to de-automatize reality, to see reality as if we're seeing that for the first time. So if you do that, if you do that work, if you do that about the Church, the Vatican, everything becomes surprising. And I was constantly surprised from the very beginning because, I was invited to follow Pope Francis to Mongolia. Would you like also to talk to the people at the Vatican and then write whatever you want with the most freedom of all? And they did not even the book before it was published. I just asked Andrea Tornelli to read it. Please check it. But actually, nobody read a single word before it was published. And so to me, everything was surprising because the Church, I'm not a believer, I say that again. In spite of my Catholic education, my Catholic family, my Catholic country, and we're used to church, but actually church is something special. And if you look at it with authenticity, 2,000 years of history. There's no other institution with such a long history. All empires have fallen down. The Spanish Empire, the Roman Empire, the church is still there. It's so weird, and it's about weird stuff. Weird stuff, totally. Well, the core of my book is the weirdest things of all, the resurrection of flesh. It's a scandal. It's absolutely incredible. What is that about? And Pope Francis knew what would be the message of my book. I don't know why I ended up there telling this. Okay, whatever. No, leave it. I won't go on. We can go back to that later on. Ruffini, okay. I go back to you. And a friendship, was born. And the Pope said that we need to slow down to tell stories. Journalists should somehow wear out the soles of their shoes. Instead, they remain in offices looking at their smartphones. It's important to tell also the sad things, the bad things, but every fact can contain the seeds of redemption, of hope. And these times seem to be based and rely simply on posts, social media. Can we really regain that slow time? Well, a friend of mine, a journalist, once told me in a witty way, I don't know if Javier and Colum do agree with that, the history of Christianity would have been so much different if social media were already there a long time ago. And let's think about imaginary, posts about the betrayal of Peter, and when Jesus chooses Peter, what would happen? Well, probably Javier book would not be there because it took time to understand. And probably even the gospel would be different if social media were there. But again, it's up to us, to each and every one of us. I don't want, to see social media as the absolute evil, not at all. It's important to be smart and intelligent because social media can be useful to share things, but you need to take time then to understand things. If everything is just about scrolling and simply sharing without second thoughts, without reflection, then we destroy the meaning of words and of relations, and also then the possibility to be part of history. So we should not wind up ourselves in a spiral of meaninglessness. It's possible to get off the carousel and take time to think over things, to use social media, in a clever way, in a smart way. Sometimes communication experts tell each other that we should embrace digital culture, but actually digital culture is made by each and every one of us. It's not up to us to adapt to economic paradigms or about the number of hits, of clicks, and then that's it. No, it's up to us to set the rules, to fix the rules. Again, always being humble. And again, always getting together, never against somebody, but always trying to share, to offer something good to the world. Just one thing about him. It's not true that we took a big risk, but Christianity is about taking risks. I totally agree. So going back to social media, well, for many young people, not being visible through the social media almost means being non-existing. All right, but okay. It seems that we're telling young people and even to children, maybe they are surrounded by relatives that offer them as a gift a smartphone, but the message that we seem to tell them is that it's all about TikTok and Instagram. Well, we grew up in an era without computers. Well, at least I did. But it's about a challenge. We should tell young people, develop different algorithms and help us, the oldies, reconquer a world that puts back communication in its right place, where sharing really means sharing and liking really means liking somebody. It's not just an empty gesture, where relations are deep and true and authentic and not just fake and superficial. And it's not about Elon Musk or Mark Zuckerberg or any other, guru or mogul. Well, social media do not mark the end of times. Anything can happen in Rimini, New York, or Barcelona. Maybe a young person will come up with a new way to experience the digital age, changing it without becoming a slave of it, a victim of it. We need to go back from there. So the digital era, it's not a substitute of the physical era. That's the key thing. It's another possibility. It's like an extension of what we are or what we do. But again, we still need to meet in person. Otherwise, you don't have families. Babies do not get born if you don't meet people in person. Families do not happen, and relations and friendships.
Ora vorrei chiedere a voi due che siete scrittori.
So I would like to ask you something. So books are the result of a slow timed work. So you tell stories, and Colum, you said how the latest 2 books were born. How do you choose the stories for your books? How you select them?
But I'd love if I could just take a moment to talk about what Paolo was talking about. You know, there's a scientist from the 20th century, Niels Bohr, who said that at the far end of a profound truth is another profound truth. So often you can get at the far end of an argument an equally powerful argument. Part of the problem is that we're trying to oversimplify so many of the things that go on in this world. Technology is good or technology is bad, for instance. But the fact of the matter is technology is both good and both bad. And we must learn to be able to hold these contradictory ideas in the palms of our hands at the exact same time. This is very, very important. Where does this begin? It begins in our schools. It begins with our teachers. And I think it's incredibly important to say thank you to our teachers and to pay them more and to look after them more and to give them bigger pensions. And I hope I get a round of applause. Thank you. Incredibly important, because our democracy and our church actually begins in our schools. That way we can inspire the ideas and the stories that need to be told. In relation to the second part of your question, where do you get your ideas from your books? I'm going to give you the best answer that I know of any answer that's going on right now. I don't know. And I say that because I think I don't know is a beautiful answer to the questions that are going on these days, because we live in a world that is diseased with certainty. Everybody is so certain. You know, come into the room if you look like me. Come into the room if you sound like me. Come into the room if you vote like me. That's not good enough. We have to be inviting people into the room who don't vote like you, who don't sound like you, who don't think like you, to hold these contradictory ideas in the palms of your hand at the exact same time. Where can this most easily happen? It's not happening in our parliaments. It can happen in our universities, and it can happen in our schools. And it can happen, indeed, in our churches. So all of these ideas come from places where we acknowledge that we don't know, but we want to know. So I think a solution to a lot of what we're talking about today is embracing curiosity.
I also want to follow up on what Paolo said and Colum said. The problem is not technology. The problem is the use that we make of technology. And this has always been the case. When Plato in Phaedra, there was a king called Thanos who spoke, and he spoke against the devil invention of writing, because writing would be a catastrophe, would mark the end of our culture, because our souls will fall into oblivion, and people will no longer use their memories, and that will mark the end of culture. And to Plato, dialogue between the disciple and the master was fundamental, and that would end with writing. And when Gutenberg invented printing, that would mark the end of the elite culture, because culture will be given to everyone and will be trivialized, will become poorer and poorer. And when television was invented, culture would end. But that was not the case. That was not the case. A new form of culture after writing, after Gutenberg, after printing started. I'm not using the social media for different reasons. But I don't believe that the social media are the devil. It depends on how we use them. Just like artificial intelligence, it's exactly the same thing. We have to use it for the good and not for the bad, in a good way and not in a bad way. Now, going to your second question, I have the same answer as Colin. But in my case, in my experience, there's a different nuance. As in, I'm never choosing stories. The stories choose me. It's very simple, as simple as that. The last story, for example, is quite evident. It was the Vatican that came up to me and said, do you want to write a story on that? Although, before that, that was already in my mind, but I didn't know how to do it. So what do we do today in Europe, in the Western society, when churches are empty, when seminars are closing down, where Catholicism is totally different compared to before, when the world is totally different? What do we do with religion today, since we live at different times? And what's going to happen now in the Catholic world? But it was quite evident. I could have never written this book without the help and without the opportunity given to me by the Vatican. That was a gift to me. But this is the case for all my books, because there are things that become obsessions to me. I have an obsession, and I don't know why they're obsessions, but they are obsessions indeed. A man is saving the life. There's a book talking about the life of a man, a Republican soldier, who saved the life to a fascist, whereas this man should have killed that fascist during the war. I was told this story, and I was obsessed with that story. And I said to myself, but why? I was wondering why. So I totally agree with you. It's curiosity. I'm writing to know things. I'm not writing because I want to tell things. I'm writing to know. And this is exactly the same thing. I had the opportunity to write this book, but that came from a personal obsession. My mother, when my father passed away, said that she would have met my father after her death. Not because my mother was weird or was peculiar, but because she was a believer, and so she believed in that. In the book, at some point, the faith of my mother is compared to the faith of Pope Francis, and Pope Francis' faith is more doubtful. It's not really... and when my father passed away, she was saying that. And I recall that when Lorenzo Fazzini came up to me and asked me to write this book. And I imagined that this book should have talked about it. A madman, the God's madman, who lost his faith, who went to meet Pope Francis. And Pope Francis is the God's madman. You know very well that Francis of Assisi was calling himself God's madman at the end of the world, Mongolia, to ask this question. Remember, Paolo, you remember that. This is the truth. Nothing has been invented in this book. When he went to the Vatican for the first time after the Pope's speech to the artists, we met at that time. I met Paolo and Arnea Tornelli. And they asked me, what do you want to talk about with the Pope? No, I just said, I want to talk about one thing, my mother. My mother said that. And I want to talk about the resurrection and eternal life. And I remember there was silence. They were looking at me saying, what? What are you talking about? No one is talking about that. No one has asked this question to the Pope. But this is the fundamental question, because this is the center of Christianity. I'm not saying that. It was St. Paul who said that. We will resurrect because Christ resurrected. Without that, Christianity would not exist. And so I thought about that. I went to see the Pope to ask him this question, to have his answer, and then to tell this answer to my mother. It's like this is a spy story. It's like this book is a spy story. But this is an enigma, which is the main enigma of Christianity, one of the main questions of our civilizations. But without this obsession, I didn't want to say that because I'm for theological reasons, but I wanted to say that for my mother, to tell my mother. I think it's the obsession and curiosity that make us write these books. So I totally agree with you. And then there's a question of language. Let's change topic, because today changing things by their name is not taken for granted. And there is a risk is twofold. Either we trivialize stories to please everyone, or we communicate through slogans, and we take violent stance which do not leave room for dialogue. And this is one of the main traps for journalists. So starting from Paolo, what do you think about that? As for the fact that we're using, that too many slogans are used, unfortunately, this is true. This is true in professional communication and interpersonal communication. When I started working as a journalist, at that time, there were no communication schools, there were no universities. We were learning by doing. And an old journalist told me the most important thing is to make a captivating titles, headlines, and making everything interesting. At that time, I was trying to make a different journalist, which can work. In general, the word captivating, appealing, wants to close you into a sort of bubble, and wants to close you, wants to make you captive, and makes you even worse. And here we have two major examples of journalists, I would say, who are also major writers. So it's not true that you cannot give back a meaning to words that we have deprived of meaning in the past. We read many headlines in the newspapers on wars, clashes, for things which actually are not clashes and not wars. And we tell wars only through statistics and numbers, without getting into details and without telling the stories of wars, like Colum and Javier did. Why this idea of having a book with Javier, and why did we ask Colum to come to the Jubilee of Communication? Because in my opinion, and I'm a journalist, journalism has to find back this ability to see things, and now only writers are doing that and not journalists. And journalists now risk to be poorer in interpersonal communication. We talk to each other without talking about things in a deep way. But there is nothing new in that. I mean, this is not new. This has always happened in the history of communication, misunderstanding, not understanding one another, from Babel onwards. Babel was the place of misunderstanding, of meetings that did not occur. And this is not the end of the times. This is not the end of the times. We are living through times. We are in times. We're living in times. And as Guardini said, and St. Augustine said, we are our own time. But it's enough to live it with the ability to change it, and we have to be humble in order to understand that we cannot change the time on our own, alone. Colin.
And I agree that we have to develop that humility in order to properly engage with the whole idea of stories and storytelling. But I think it's important not to privilege the point of view of the novelist or the poet or the playwright or the filmmaker. I don't think they're more important than the journalist. I think the journalist is just as important as the poet, and the journalist is just as important as the novelist. It's how she or he gets into the story and uses the language to tell the truth. And then this big question comes about, well, what is the truth? We're talking about language here. So how do we perceive what is true? Well, facts are mercenary things, right? You can push a fact in whatever direction you want it to go. But there are other things that have no facts around them, like issues of love, pride, pity, compassion, sacrifice, violence, these very important things that we have to be investigating as journalists too. So how do we do that? I think we mentioned earlier that the journalist should not stay in the room. He should not live with closed curtains, should not put a GPS coordinate on his or her imagination. They've got to get down into the street and to meet the people and to tell the stories that are operating on the ground. Sometimes even stories that you don't want to tell. It seems to me that literature is news that stays news. And if we as journalists go in and gather the news that's happening, in the prisons, for instance, on the streets, in the supposedly anonymous corners of human experience, then we will be doing something more powerful. Look, I'm here with the wonderful Diane Foley, whose son Jim Foley was a journalist who went to Syria and was killed. He was one of those journalists who was prepared to go to the very edge. He knew it wasn't going to do anything new or discover anything new in the corridors of power. What he wanted to do was go down to the marketplace, go down to the street, talk to the kids, talk to the older people who are on the street, to discover the truth that's emanating from a more honest place. And I think if we can encourage our newspapers and our readers and ourselves to read those stories and to be interested in those stories, then I think we will begin to heal some of these wounds that are going on. And I do hope that we can expand the notion of journalism, expand the notion of novels, of poems, and all begin to sort of talk about the elemental story, which is the story of the human condition. And we're in a bad way right now. We're in a really bad way right now. And it's time for us to sort of wake up, start reading again, start developing this curiosity that we've been talking about. And it's up to us to tell the stories that we can tell as powerfully as we can.
Quindi mi pare che
So it seems to me that the challenge is to find stories that feed life and that can heal wounds. It's not that we don't have to speak about the evil, but we have to find the faces, those places that in situations that seems to be hopeless make us understand that something can be repaired. There's the title of a chapter of the book American Mother, where you were talking about a Northern Irish poet, and you write story and hope can rhyme together.
Seamus Heaney, he talked about finding the moment in life where hope and history rhyme. I think it's particularly important. I will tell you this. In relation to Israel and Palestine and Rami and Bassam, the characters that I wrote about, when they went to go on Israeli TV and started talking about being friends with one another, they stopped. First of all, I'll go back on my story. They went to meet with Pope Francis, right? And this is a year ago. It was an extraordinary moment. I watched Pope Francis listen to them. I have never seen anybody ever listen as beautifully as Pope Francis did. You could see the words entering him. And he was listening to this Israeli and he was listening to this Palestinian, and it was gorgeous. When they went back to the West Bank and to Jerusalem together as friends, they were invited onto Israeli TV to talk about their experience with the Pope. For the first 10 minutes, they talked about their experience with the Pope. And then when they finally said what they thought about the situation in Israel and Palestine, the TV station went to ad break, cut them off, said, no, we're not going to listen to that. How do we stop these TV stations, newspapers, magazines from censoring people who have a message of peace and friendship? And it seems to me to be a profound problem that two very simple men have a very simple message. We don't need to love each other. We don't need to even like each other, but we must understand each other. And that gets cut off on TV. How does that happen?
We still have a few minutes to go. Let's go back to language. Because there is something that Cercas really likes, which is the challenge of language used in the church. You are saying that even the church has to change language. Yes, it's very easy to say that from the outside. How can you do that? Well, according to Francis, there is no inside and outside. But in any case, I am a non-believer. So I believe that as a non-believer, that the church has a language problem. Seen from the outside, it's self-evident. There is an immense paradox in the fact that Christianity, Christ, is something revolutionary. It is. This is evidence. That changed the world. It changed the world. We go back to the beginning. Christ was a revolutionary man, was a man saying dangerous things. I didn't come to bring a peace, but sword. All men and women are equal. And that was very dangerous at that time with slavery. And today that's very dangerous. Christ was going around not with the rich, but with the poor and with prostitutes and with dodgy people. I mean, he was judged because he was a very dangerous man, and he was considered as a criminal. And that was a revolution. He made clearly a social revolution. We are the result of this revolution. We cannot understand Europe and the Western world without this revolution, but there is also a metaphysical revolution, which is rebellion against death. This is the center of Christianity, flesh resurrection and eternal life. This is it. This is rebellion against death. This is crazy. That was a scandal, as Pope Francis said. So the big paradox is that I see two problems here. There's a problem on which we don't always agree with Paolo, but today with Paolo we will agree. On the one hand, a church has a language problem because it's an old language, because it's used in an old language, which lacks vitality, which lacks life. Jesus made this revolution for his own life, out of his own life and out of his own words. He changed the world with his words. His words were very attractive to people. But the language of the church today is not attractive, is not appealing, is not strong. There is something lacking, for example, to Pope Francis, which is a sense of humor, irony. The title of Pope Francis' last book is Long Live Poetry. So what is poetry? Poetry is a strong language, dense language, attractive language. And we need such a language. we need to change our own language in order to reach people so that this revolutionary language can make a revolution for the people. And this is not easy, but without that, nothing is possible. Also, and here we will agree today, language is very often closed in itself, that people do not understand. Even most Catholics do not understand language sometimes. You all know that popes talk to journalists, and they always have one key word. All popes have keywords. Journalists talk a lot about that. Periphery, for example, discernment. These are keywords. And the key word of Pope Francis is not understood by anyone but you, but the audience. There are many people in the audience. Synodality. Synodality. Raise your hand if you understand what synodality is. My mother does not understand that. My mother didn't understand what synodality was. What is synodality? And yesterday we talked about it, and I agree with you. The church wasn't able to understand what synodality is. So what is synodality, in my opinion? Shifting from a vertical church to a horizontal church. Hence, problems. Making a more democratic church. Wow. Well, you see people? People are, give me a round of applause here. And even some cardinals are happy with that. But there's people like Paolo do not agree with that. And I understand that, because when you think about democracy, you think about elections, free elections, parliaments, and so on and so forth. But this is our own democracy, layman democracy, liberal democracy. But if we go back to the original meaning, to the etymological meaning of the word, things change. What is the meaning of democracy? It means power to people, people's power. So, synodality, I'm not giving a definition, but synodality is a sort of power given to the people of God, to God's people. And this is not an invention by Pope Francis. This is the apostles. Apostles that gathered together when they had a problem to discuss about the problem and to come up with a solution. This is important. It's a form not of democracy, but of democratization of the church. It's not something decided by the Pope top down. One of the many things that I learned with this book is that the Pope does not hold the whole power, all the power. It cannot say that, okay, tomorrow there will be women priests. It cannot do that, because otherwise there will be schism, there will be many other problems. And this people's power has been seen at important times. In the Synod of Amazonia, when Pope Francis had, as usual, disruptive ideas, revolutionary ideas, like, for example, the fact that married people could say Mass. And he saw that the church was not ready for that. He listened to the people. The people said what they thought, but he said, no, this is not possible. And now I will stop. It would be very important to talk about democratization because all laymen should learn about the synodality of the church. Today, democracy is in crisis because democracy cannot just be going to vote every 4 years, because this democracy would be not sufficient, is very poor. So I will stop now. I'm not asking for the church to democratize, but the synodalization of democracy, maybe. We could talk about that. And now, Paolo, just give a very short answer. Javier said so many things that in 9 seconds I cannot give you an answer. But anyway, following up to what you said, certainly there's a language problem, but one of the things that we discussed together with Javier is that language comes after things. Alas, the church has a problem which is not just related to language. The church, and I think that this word is going to be very dear to you, either the church is communion or there is no church. Either we are one single body or there is no church. And this communion does not only concern the church, but is also related to the fact that we believe that we're all God's children. If we believe in these words, our words are meaningful. If two people say that they love each other but they don't love each other, they can say whatever they want, but those words will be meaningless, will not speak. And this is where the church has to rediscover the beauty of communion, rediscover the beauty. And then I want to read you 4 lines of the Testament, because it's a life, it's the death on the cross, it's the martyr's death, explaining what the church is. So synodality, in the end, is a word like many which has lost its meaning. It's an old word, but there are many neologisms that we now have and that we don't understand. Yesterday we were talking about Googling. Googling, everyone knows. Synodality, no one knows. Why so? Because it has to do with behaviors. If behaviors no longer exist, then the word becomes meaningless. So I will talk to you about the Testament of Christian de Chergé. Maybe I will read a few lines. If you haven't seen the exhibition, go and see it, because the Martyrs exhibition is wonderful. Because it's absurd, because Christianity is somewhat absurd, and sometimes we turned it into a parade of glory. This is a testament that was written by Christian de Chergé before being martyrized. And they expected to be martyrs. And they expected that someone would say, yes, you deserve that. Well, why were they there as Christians? And there he wrote, they have to understand that my curiosity will be freed. Those persons should know that most of my avid curiosity will finally be set free. This is what I shall be able to do, God willing, immerse my gaze in that of the Father to contemplate his children of Islam with him, just as he sees them, all shining with the glory of Christ, the fruit of his passion, filled with the gift of the Spirit, whose secret joy will always be to establish communion and restore the likeness, juggling with the differences. For this life lost, totally mine and totally theirs, I thank God, who seems to have willed it entirely for the sake of that joy in everything and in spite of everything. In this thank you, where everyone is included, from now on, I certainly include you, friends of yesterday and today, and you, my friends of this place, along with my mother and father, my sisters and brothers, and their families. You are the 100-fold granted as was promised. And I also include you, my last-minute friend, who will not have known what you were doing. Yes, I want this thank you and this goodbye to be a God bless for you too, because in God's face I see yours. May we meet again as happy thieves in paradise, if it pleases God, the Father of us both. Amen, inshallah. This is Christianity. This is the church. This is communion. And this is the meaning of the words. Synodality means walking together, all of us.
Colum, volevi aggiungere?
Colin, did you want to add something?
Very briefly, I said that there are 3 words that are very important. I'm going to give you 3 sets of 3 words. The first, I don't know. The second, I love you. And the third, which is what I think the theme of today is, and I would love if after we finish, everybody here would find somebody that they don't know and say hello to them, and maybe even share a story with somebody that they don't know. The third set of 3 words, which is the theme that you presented us with, and beautifully, I must say, thank you so much, is that communication is communion.
La comunione, questo direi.
Bene.
Okay. Now, let's draw to a close, but what have we understood? That this is mankind is an uninterrupted chain of stories that are told through your books. Stories that, when they're told, can transform your life. Come and see, and I can tell you what has happened. This is the task of journalists, writers, and all of us. Thank you very much to Colum, McCann, Javier, Cercas, and Paolo Ruffini for this session. At the end of the session, I remind you that the meeting is organized by volunteers. I was talking to Colum's hostess, and we found out that volunteers are not paid, so the meeting has to be supported. You have the Dona Ora desks, Donate Now desks, where you can donate and support the meeting. Thank you very much to all of you for being here.
Are you okay? Are you great. You're wonderful. Thank you very much.
Questo è un luogo che genera dialogo,
Qualcuno che si impegna, che si batte.
che approfondisce la conoscenza e sostiene la fiducia. È un crocevia dove si incontra chi desidera il vero, il bello, il giusto e il bene. È una testimonianza di speranza nel cuore ferito del presente. E tutto questo
Proporre con la propria vita.
esiste anche grazie a te.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. EasyBank, semplicemente banca.
Questa è una storia fatta di energie diverse, nate per sorprendere.
Ed eccoci arrivati al settore della distribuzione dei
Partite da lontano, vanno avanti ancora oggi. Perché andare avanti non vuol dire seguire una sola direzione, ma trasformare idee in soluzioni. Quelli di Plenitude ed Anylive, che si completano nella famiglia Eni, da energie diverse, un'energia unica.
È bello avere quello che ti serve quando ti serve. Con EasyBank, la banca digitale di Intesa San Paolo. EasyBank, semplicemente banca.
Questa è una storia fatta di energie diverse, nate per sorprendere.
Ed eccoci arrivati al settore della distribuzione dei
Partite da lontano, vanno avanti ancora oggi. Perché andare avanti non vuol dire seguire una sola direzione, ma trasformare idee in soluzioni. Quelli di Plenitude ed Anylive, che si completano nella famiglia Eni, da energie diverse, un'energia unica.